Shabbat Shalom. Mazal Tov to David and the Waldman family. Welcome to everyone who's here for this wonderful simcha. About a year ago, This American Life, the radio program, I guess it's now a podcast, ran an episode called The Longest Distance Between 2 Points. And in that episode, Ira Glass, the host of the show, interviewed a 10-year-old boy named Cassidy, who has dyslexia. And he asks him about it, and then Cassidy on the show tries to decode a very long word that he's not familiar with, and it's quite difficult. And along the way, as he's decoding, he shares some of the tips and the tricks that he has learned, what's in his toolbox, that help him get to the point of decoding the word, though it takes a very long time. And this episode really touched my heart, because there's someone close to me in my family with dyslexia, and I have seen how hard they work to read and to write, and how painful it can be sometimes for them to feel like they are not like everyone else, that they're not normal. Am I stupid? They've asked. What's amazing and beautiful about what Glass does on the show is that he characterizes the lengthy process that Cassidy has to go through as a long road to get to a place that other people get to more quickly. And he uses this frame to introduce the show, the rest of which has nothing to do with dyslexia. Rather, he profiles people who have to take a long road. And he embraces this quality, not as a defect, not as a hurdle to overcome, but as a strength. And he says about such people, it takes them more time, it's more effort. But the thing about doing it that way, you don't take anything for granted. You see so much more than other people do. Glass's frame is one that is used by some circles in the disability community to understand disability not as a flaw, not as something to pity, not something to try and fix, but rather a positive part of one's identity, part of what makes a person holy and unique and contributing to the holy and beautiful tapestry of humanity. Rabbi Julia Watts-Belzer is a professor of Jewish studies at Georgetown University and a faculty member in Georgetown's Disability Studies program. She's a disability justice activist. She herself is in a wheelchair. And she writes, the disability justice movement has drawn many of us together for activism, for artistry, for community. In these circles, disability is not a medical diagnosis, but a cultural movement. Approaching disability through the lens of culture allows us to appreciate disability as a dimension of human diversity. Because it is Jewish Disability Awareness, Acceptance, and Inclusion Month, I want to take a look at our Parsha, and specifically Matan Torah, the revelation at Sinai, the giving of the Torah, through the lens of disability. What might the narrative of Revelation have to teach us about this topic? What can we learn from the many midrashim, the stories and the commentaries and rabbinic and medieval and contemporary interpretations that have been offered over the centuries about this seminal moment, what is arguably the most important moment in our tradition and in our people's history? So it will not surprise you to know that there are multiple perspectives offered, sometimes competing and conflicting. And there's really so much that we can study, but I want to look at two midrashim today, two rabbinic passages that seem to reflect different ends of the spectrum in terms of their understanding of what happened at Sinai. So the first is from Bamidbar Rabbah, and the midrash begins by declaring that when the people of Israel left Egypt, every single person had some kind of physical flaw or disability because of the experience of slavery. Because that kind of hard work, a giant stone might drop on your foot and break your foot. Something would get in your eye and blind you. The physical experience of slavery had lasting impact, and no one got out of Egypt unaffected. And then the Midrash says, when they came to the Sinai desert, God said, "Is this the honor of Torah, that I should give it to a generation of maimed people? But if I wait until others arrive, then I would be delaying giving the Torah." What did God do? God told the angels to go down to the Israelites and heal them. A parallel version of this midrash, also from Bamidbar Rabbah, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai taught, at the time Israel stood before Sinai to receive the Torah, no one among them was blind, deaf, stupid, mute, or lame. Of that moment it says, "You are wholly beautiful, my love." This is a verse from Song of Songs. "And there is no defect in you." The implication of these midrashim is that no one was able to be at Sinai if they had some kind of defect, some kind of disability. No one with a mum, a blemish, can receive Torah. I read these texts and I wonder about my family member with dyslexia. Would this midrash have understood them as stupid? Would they have been able to stand at Sinai to experience revelation just as the person they are as God created them? Or would they have had to undergo this divine intervention to eliminate their blemish? Would this child not have been at Sinai? These are painful texts to read. I do want to acknowledge that I'm giving them a cursory read right now. In fact, they are more nuanced and complex than we have time to go into this morning. And I highly, highly recommend a class by Rabbi Aviva Richman of Hadar, the first in a series called "The Torah Was Not Given to Angels," where she really does a beautiful analysis of these midrashim and many others to understand in a very nuanced way how the rabbis are trying to understand what it means to be embodied, what it means to be a person in a body. But even if there are subtleties that can be drawn out through a detailed analysis and a close read, even if there is more than meets the eye, what meets the eye is pretty harsh. That it would be a dishonor to the Torah for someone with a disability to be present at revelation. That people need to be fixed before they can stand before God. These are painful texts to read. On the other end of the spectrum, there is a midrash in Shmot Rabbah. You may be familiar with it. It teaches that God revealed the Torah to each person at Sinai according to their ability, to their capacity. Bo ur'u he'ach ha'kol yotzeh etzel kol Yisrael kol echad ve'echad lefi kocho. Come and see how the voice would go out, the voice of God would go out among all of Israel, each and every one according to their ability. the elders according to their ability, the young ones according to the ability, the infants, the sucklings, the women, even Moshe according to his unique ability. As it is stated in Exodus, Moshe would speak and God would answer him with a voice that Moshe could withstand. Kol echad ve'echad lefi kocho. Each and every one according to the individual capacity of each person. In this midrash, there's no fixing. There's no healing. There's no trying to make everyone the same or trying to fit everyone in the same mold. There is acceptance and embracing of difference. In her analysis of the revelation at Sinai, the text that we will read this morning, Dr. Ora Horn-Prauser, a scholar of Jewish education, refers to God as the master teacher. The master teacher, she shows how the revelation employs every one of the best practices in teaching, in pedagogy, in order for the Torah to be understood by everyone with their varying needs and their varying abilities. The auditory learner, the visual learner, the kinesthetic learner, there's family education, there's experiential education, there are memory aids that are offered. God is really tuning in to each person's need and ability to learn and speaking to each person in a voice that they will be able to understand. I think this is exactly what the Midrash is expressing, even though it doesn't use this modern terminology for the educational strategies. Dr. Prauser writes, we can come to see God sensitively adjusting for different kinds of learners and truly desiring that the message of revelation be understood by all. So this Midrash gives us a profoundly different understanding of the relationship between God and the people of Israel at this moment. God is not a healer. God is not miraculously taking away physical and mental defects, but God is a compassionate, loving master teacher who sees and embraces the diversity and accounts for it from the get-go in how revelation happens. You may have been here a few weeks ago, the bat mitzvah of Amalia Heller. She spoke so powerfully and beautifully about her developmentally disabled uncle and described him as being the person closest to God, the person she knows who is closest to God. And I think we get a glimpse of that in this midrash, that to be close to God, you have to be who you are. So these are two very different views expressed in these midrashim. And what do we do with this? What do we do with this when we have a text that we like and a text that we don't like? Maybe we just want to focus on the text that we like. It's so much easier. We'll just go with that one and ignore the other one. But these texts are all part of our tradition. And these are not the only difficult texts in our tradition. In our canon, there are many that we might find offensive or bigoted or discriminatory on all areas, gender, age, sexuality. So we have a lot of hard texts. And what do we do with hard texts? I believe that these texts have a very, very important role to play. When we want to assess them through our contemporary lenses, we're so evolved, we're so enlightened, we disparage the authors of these texts, but what we really need to be doing is holding up these texts as a mirror to ourselves and to our own societies and communities, and let them reflect potentially some uncomfortable truths. Really? Are you really so evolved and enlightened? Look in this mirror. Where are the places where contemporary society, institutions, individuals pity the people who are not normal, try to fix them and heal them? Where are the places where, like in the God of the Midrash, we see disability as blemish, as something that detracts from the worth of a person, that makes it difficult or impossible for them to be close to God, to access Torah, to be part of a sacred community? We need to live into the invitation, the exhortation, I would say, of both of these midrashim, to lift up the aspirational vision of kol echad ve'echad lefi kocho, that every person should have access and membership in community based on their individual needs. And we also need to hold up the midrash that we might find so challenging or offensive and ask ourselves, in what way does my community mirror this text? So I am not an expert in disability justice and accessibility and inclusion, not by far, but I know enough to look around this building and to look at this institution and see that we are getting some things right and that we have a long, long way to go. It's wonderful to see that we have ASL interpreters here this morning. Maybe you should be here every week. There's a lot we need to think about when we think about who is part of our community. But one thing I'm certain of is that it's not just our buildings and curricula and technology that might need to change. There's a deeper change that starts inside, in our hearts and in our minds, in the way that we ourselves characterize disability. And here, I really have to take the lead from those who are experts, those who have a lived experience that I do not. And so I return to the words of Rabbi Watts Belzer, who writes, "I claim disability as a vibrant part of my own identity, as a meaningful way of naming and celebrating the intricate unfolding of my own skin and soul." Now, not everyone holds this perspective, but I find it incredibly powerful, especially to the extent that no person is perfect, that we all have imperfections and flaws. To see every person standing at Sinai, the intricate unfolding of their own skin and soul. And we ask ourselves, what do we do? What must we do to make that true today? Shabbat Shalom.